diligently to conduct a thorough and transparent investigation into what happened to help prevent future tragedies. In the week since the tragedy occurred, many members of the media have contacted my office looking for information. And I want to be here before you all today to assure you that you will be getting information out to you as quickly as we can while our investigation progresses. We are pulling back lots of layers here, and we are not going to jump to any conclusions until the facts are known and information is provided to us, because that would not be fair to the family. But it is my absolute promise that we will continue to keep an updated and invest on the investigation, always as up to our part of our transparency and our commitment to the transparent process. As you all know, my department has set up an online folder where several records have related to the ride's operations have already been publicly shared. This folder includes the initial inspection report from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, which was conducted before the ride opened in December, at which time no deficiencies were found. It also includes manufacturer's manual for the ride, the accident report submitted to our department by the ride operator, and several other documents from the ride operator. We encourage those seeking further records or updates to continue to check this online folder where additional records will be shared on an ongoing basis as we receive further information as part of our investigation. I am also here today to reassure Tyre's family, friends, and all those impacted by this tragedy that we are fully committed to finding out what happened so we can better prevent such tragedies from happening in the future. And that's why we will not be jumping to any conclusions before the information is provided to us and we know all the facts. To that end, we have hired a forensic engineer with Quest Engineering and Failure Analysis, specifically to assist with this investigation. These engineers are experts in the field who have previously worked with the department following the sandblaster incident in Daytona Beach in 2018, which our department was able to shut down operations following our investigation. Based on our findings, our investigation is complete. We will immediately make changes to our rules if needed under our existing authorities, as well as pursue statutory changes with our legislative partners if necessary. That's why I'm also pleased to have Representative Thompson here today. And first of all, Representative, thank you for opening up this magnificent historical museum for all of us to be here today. Representative Thompson, as we are here in your district, I'd like to turn it over to you to speak on the impact this tragedy has had here in Orlando.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you all for being here. I am a mother, I am a grandmother, and this pains me in a very personal way. When you send your children away for spring break or from your hometown, you certainly want them to enjoy the area where they're traveling, and you expect them to return safely. And so I'm very concerned, and I've been in touch with Attorney Ben Crump, who represents the family. And in consultation with Attorney Crump and getting input from the family, they're not interested so much in fixing blame as in fixing the problem. And I'll be working with them to fix the problem. And if there is legislative action that's needed to give more authority to the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, that's what we'll be focused on, whether that is about training, whether it's about insurance, metal fatigue, all of the things that they do now. But a lot of that authority is given to the vendor, to the company that actually operates the ride. And I want to point out that the company, Slingshot, rents space or leases space from Icon Park. But I have heard also from Icon Park, and they are interested as well in working collaboratively. Statistics show that the overwhelming majority of people who come to Central Florida enjoy the amusements, they enjoy the entertainment, They enjoy the rides, whether we're talking about helicopters or go-karts or water slides or whatever. But we want no exceptions. And this certainly was the exception rather than the rule. So we will be looking at legislation once we get the report following the investigation that Commissioner Freed has already referenced. Once we get that report, we'll know the direction that we need to take with regard to legislation. But I have committed to the family and commit to this community, and I'll be working to bring all of the stakeholders together. I've committed to filing the Tyre Sampson bill in the legislature that would address the problems that are identified once we get the investigation. At this point, we don't have all of the facts, so we can't, in terms of a knee-jerk reaction, say this is what needs to happen. But once we have the investigation, I'll be working on the Tyre Sampson bill to address whatever the problems are. And the theme parks, all of them, are in my legislative district. And so I know that tourism in this area is the lifeblood of the state of Florida and of the community. So I have a lot of stakeholders who are very interested in coming together and working collaboratively to address the problem. So at this point, I'll be glad to answer questions, as I'm sure the commissioner would as well.
Wait 2 seconds, though. I want to get one more person in here, too.
Okay.
That's okay?
All right, that's fine.
So thank you so much. I still call you my senator. But I also would like to also introduce Rick Kimsley, who is our Director of our Consumer Services.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. With no federal regulation for safety on these type of rides, the state of Florida is one of only 29 states that have created amusement ride safety programs. Florida law and department rule requires some of the most strict and comprehensive inspection processes in the country. The Division of Consumer Services has statutory authority to permit temporary and non-exempt permanent amusement rides. We also conduct safety inspections at the time of permitting and a 6-month follow-up inspection after the permit date. We conduct accident investigations following certain incidences of patron injury. During the permitting process, the ride owner must submit proof of insurance and an affidavit of compliance and non-destructive testing, which in part states that a professional engineer or qualified inspector has tested the ride and it is in conformance with the state statute and department rules. The permit and semi-annual inspection processes are conducted by the department inspectors to review the ride's conformance with adopted international safety standards and all ride manufacturer manuals and safety bulletins. As the commissioner said, we're going to open it up to questions, but I'd like to remind you that we will not be commenting on this incident specifically or our ongoing investigation.
Commissioner, is it possible that once the investigation is complete that you may permanently shut this ride down or not allow it to operate anymore?
So the ride right now is shut down indefinitely, and based on the end of our investigation, we'll be able to make that determination. It's impossible for us to speculate or draw a conclusion at this time.
Commissioner, can you say if the ride operators were underage or adults? That's important in how we present the information that your office has released.
I don't know if we know that. Do we know that information? We might not know that information or not, but that's what we're compiling right now to make sure that's part of our investigation.
We've heard they're teens, so is it like a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old? That's important in how.
We're looking into everything.
Commissioner, is there a place in your oversight somewhere where you can periodically check these ride operators to make sure they're following the protocols that are in place and the rules that you have in place?
We do inspections on these rides that are permanent every 6 months per the statutes.
But that's safety inspections, that's not inspections on actual oversight of the ride, correct? And what workers are doing? And
We don't have oversight on that. It is purely for the inspections on the rides themselves.
As I mentioned, the Commissioner's Office has authority that's delegated to the department by the legislature. And so if the legislature now needs to go back to Chapter 616 and shore up and strengthen regulations with regard to training, the age of the operators, all of those kinds of things would be the legislative remedy, but we will only know that once we get the results of the investigation.
So we're not going to jump to any conclusions about whether or not age issues or the intensity of the inspections until which time that we get a thorough and complete investigation done, and then from there, I promise you all, and to the family, to this community, to everybody, that based on the investigation, we will be working internally, if we've already got authority to make changes, and with our assistance from our legislature to make changes that we deem necessary based solely on the investigation.
In the
During your
meantime,
investigation,
does anyone have jurisdiction over, just now, currently?
We have shut down the ride to do the investigation.
But over the workers, as she asked earlier, is anyone allowed to kind of inspect that, and if so, who, and if not, it's just a question.
We do oversee training to make sure that training is up to date. I'm sorry. The department does oversee training and make sure that training records are up to date as required by the manufacturer. So we do view that as part of our normal inspection process.
But to follow up on that, it's essentially the person that's in charge of the ride, that it's their responsibility to oversee their own workers. You don't go to make sure to see that Bob, who's running the ride that day, is following all the protocols. There's no oversight of that by the state.
If we have a complaint from a consumer that they have issues with safety on the ride, the department will investigate and make sure that ride operations are proceeding as required by the manufacturer.
Can you tell us, is there a specific standard for training? X number of hours, operating under supervision or apprenticeship for a number of weeks or months? Is there anything like that in the state, or simply a requirement that you write it on paper and file it with the state?
We follow requirements by the manufacturer and take suggestions from the manufacturer on the number of hours that they require someone to be trained to safely operate a ride.
That wasn't written into the manual. Do you have any idea how many hours would be appropriate for somebody to be trained on that? I mean, let's take, for example, if you've got somebody riding an Orange County Schools bus, you've got a bus driver that's been permitted by the state of Florida with a regular driver's license, they need to get a CDL and probably some other things to be driving children to school. There's at least 30 kids on a school bus. There's at least 30 kids on most of these amusement rides. I mean, is this like, wham bam, thank you ma'am, you're getting this training and it could be done in 2 hours, 4 hours, or it could be done in 4 weeks? Is there anybody that makes sure that this is thorough training and not just checking a box and writing a signature?
These are all parts of our investigation that we're not going to be able to comment on.
And let me ask you this as well. It sounds like it's up to the manufacturer to tell you guys what they think is appropriate for their rides. Case in point, I know you're not getting case specific here, but we've got a letter from the manufacturer in this specific case that says a seatbelt isn't necessary, yet I think every person in this room has spoken with multiple experts that said a seatbelt could have saved their lives. Are you guys comfortable just going by what the manufacturer is recommending when it comes to safety measures, or do you think that there needs to be stricter measures in place to make sure?
So that's obviously part of the things that we're investigating, and some of the things that we are looking at the end of the conclusion, whether or not those are issues to be addressed, and then those are times that we're going to go into statutory changes. We are doing everything that's per the statute, the authority that's been given to us, and a vast majority of the statutory oversight refers back to following the manufacturing guidelines. So our power is limited on following the manufacturer. Even with that letter, our authority goes into we're following the protocols by the manufacturer. So again, these are, as we go through this investigation, if we are finding that that is not appropriate, and again, we're basing it solely on the investigation, not speculation, is when we will be seeing if there's things that can be changed inside of the department or things that may need to be done by the legislature.
Do you think it needs to be strengthened now, just knowing what you know?
I don't know anything yet, is the problem. You know, I am waiting on the investigation, and until which time that we know exactly what happened and exactly what things can or should or potentially needs to be addressed. But I'm not going to jump to any conclusions until the investigation is done. That is not fair to the family. I mean, the family is going to need to know what happened, and we are not going to speculate until which time, because that family needs closure too, and know that based on what happened, that we are addressing that situation.
During your investigation, do you find anything before that can worry us about this attraction?
something that could worry the department before in the first inspection?
No. When our inspection was done in December to open up the ride, we went through everything that we have to do through the protocols of the manual, of the manufacturer's manual, everything that we saw that we inspected to open up the ride. We followed the protocols, we followed the manual, and everything was up to par per the manual of the manufacturer.
Are you
owe
comfortable
it
with
to
their protocols?
consumers?
Can you tell us, have you spoken personally with any family member?
I have not spoken personally with the family members as yet.
Do you
Is
feel
your
like
office
you owe it to
comfortable with
any
those
consumers
protocols?
to let them
Whoa,
know
whoa,
that
whoa.
there's a
Wait,
maximum weight?
I said, is your office comfortable with those protocols?
We oversee and inspect thousands of rides throughout the entire state. And so we have to, per the statute, per the protocols across the entire state, follow the manufacturing guidelines. That is what is mandated to the Department of Agriculture. We have no authority to question a manufacturer's protocols unless we have received some type of, consumer complaint, and then we follow up, whether it's the manufacturer or the operator, based on that consumer complaint. But at the time when this was open in December, we followed the protocols, we followed the manual of the manufacturer, and everything was exactly as par per the manual.
If
There
there's
are
a
a lot
maximum
of
weight limit,
rides, there are a lot of rides around the state, a lot of older rides that have added seat belts over the years that have added protection of safety. Can the state make manufacturers add the seat belts in so that something like this doesn't happen?
Again, we are, for this ride in particular, so I'm only going to, this ride in particular, we are going to, can't jump to that conclusion until the investigation is done. And then we'll make sure we look through if other changes need to be made for the future.
And based on the investigation, I think it may be that we will look at seat belts. You and I drive cars that have seat belts and airbags. So I think redundancy is a good thing. And it may be that the investigation will point out that not only the harness, but an additional safeguard, which would have been a seat belt, could have saved Tyre's life.
do you think you owe it to consumers in the state of Florida to let people know that there is a maximum weight on some of these rides?
So we go through, so first of all, there are rides that are in throughout the entire state that do have weight limits. And it is up to, unfortunately, this is again things that we're going to be looking into as we go through this investigation, is we have to rely on them. We are our charged responsibility of relying on the manufacturers, how their protocols are put into place, the things, the signage that they're putting into place. We follow the manual. And those are, again, per the investigation, and that is something that should be addressed. At that time, we will address it.
The state statute though says explicitly that signage should be posted about height, weight restrictions, and you're saying based on the way the law is written that it actually falls on the manufacturer's shoulders.
That is correct.
Have
Is
you
that a
seen any
problem?
of the video of this accident?
I unfortunately have. And again, I think that we all need to go back down to the basics, that a family lost their son. And no family should have to go through what they are going through right now. And the promise that I can make to the people of our state, we are not taking this lightly. We are going to do everything in our power, and including potentially increasing our power, to make sure that something like this never happens again. This is my solemn promise to you all that we are going to have a complete and thorough investigation that is going to be transparent. That is why I am here today. That is why our department has created a Dropbox. As we get information, we are going to disclose it. And as soon as our investigation report is done, we will come back here, give a complete thorough of what the investigation shows, be with our elected officials if legislative action needs to be taken, and work together, because no family should ever have to go through this again. And we will do everything in our control to make sure that that does not happen.
Was this the only?
Commissioner, just to clarify, are you saying that there's no state or federal agency that oversees what these manufacturers do with their vehicles?
That is correct.
How long do you anticipate do what they want?
There is no oversight board that says that. However, per our statutes, every single ride needs to have an affidavit from an engineer, from engineering firms, that sign off via affidavit on actually the protocols of every aspect of the ride, making sure that it is safe. So we have to make sure that when we authorize a ride to open, that we have received that documentation both from the manufacturer and from a expert engineer who has done all the necessary testings out there, and that's what we have to rely on.
Are there
The
any other
manual of
complaints
the
out
ride
there?
put a high on a weight, but we couldn't see in the ride any specific of that. Do you think that the riders should be see like the estimate like high or weight when they're gonna ride? Because it's nothing on the park.
Again, we're going to go through the investigation. We're not going to jump to any conclusions of what, at this point, we're going to go through the investigation and make changes based on the output of the investigation.
Are there any other complaints or incidents besides this one that you guys are reviewing and we will be getting, or?
Not that I'm aware of.
Commissioner, how long do you anticipate your investigation?
It's going to take as long as we need to. We are not going to rush this.
Is there any other question that we could answer at this point, so we can
Theme
start?
parks, what are other theme parks saying about this?
Yeah.
Have you been in touch with other theme parks, not just Icon Park? Have they reached out to your office? You know, Representative Thompson, I know you mentioned that you wanted to bring everyone to the table when we spoke on
Yes.
Wednesday. Have they reached out to you? What are they saying? I mean, this is a major industry here in Central.
My staff is working to organize a meeting of the amusement park riders, and I visited Ripley's Believe It or Not earlier this year during a meeting of the Association of Amusement Parks. And as you might imagine, there are no amusement park operators who want to see this kind of tragedy. And so they are very receptive to coming together to talk about what we can do going forward to make things better.
At the end of the day, if you wind up finding issues, does the manufacturer get in trouble? Does the ride operator get in trouble? Does the owner of the ride get in trouble? Like, how would things shake out if you do find issues?
I mean, we have statutory authority as far as fining and obviously shutting down the ride if we feel that based on the investigation, that it should not be operative anymore. So based on that's obviously where we're going to go with it. But we have authorization that if we see in the investigation that somebody was derelict in their responsibilities or changed something or did something that was not in alignment with the training or alignment with, you know, the protocols, then of course we have authorization to fine. And of course we know that the legal team on the civil side, that's on them to figure this out.
Have the theme parks
Just
been in
to
touch with
increase
you?
your oversight into this, is that something you would have to increase your oversight so much of this is not up to those manufacturers and how they carry this out? Would that be something you can expand yourself, or would that take legislative action to increase your?
Yeah, I mean, some things are definitely, we're going to need help with the legislature, that if we find there's things that we can't do within our purview of our statutes, that's when we are going to go with the legislature and figure out how to make sure that we have increased our control or oversight over this. But again, we're not going to do any of that until we see what exactly happened and make sure that the investigation is thorough. And from there, we'll make whatever determination.
Greg Fox has over here has been.
Just a quick question. They operate 7 rides here. There's only 2 of them that are closed. Should Slingshot Group be closing all of their rides locally until your investigation is done?
We only have authorization to close the ride that is in question.
Right, is your office at all involved with the sheriff's office's criminal investigation? Any of your
Not
records being
not at this time. So
And have the theme parks reached out to you specifically, just to circle back on this question?
not that I'm aware of, but
No.
none of the other theme parks have reached out to us. I mean, everybody is waiting for this investigation to happen and to see what the outcome of it is.
And we're taking the initiative out of my district office to bring the theme park, all of the theme parks are in my house, District 44. So we are taking the lead in saying, let's all come together to see how we make sure there's not a reoccurrence of what happened with Slingshot.
Can you explain what Quest Engineering can do that your inspectors aren't able to do, like what goes into their work?
What does Quest Engineer can do that our inspectors?
The forensic engineers, like what are they able to do?
Yeah, they will help us look at the engineering of the ride and come up with as in the sandplaster incident that we had, they were able to do a root cause analysis for us and tell us exactly where the failure happened. So we're working in conjunction with them and our inspectors too.
Because remember, what our inspectors do when they come up to a ride is they have the manual. They have the manual that you all have now seen. And our inspectors, who are extremely overly qualified. I mean, I've met with them all. They talk a language that I don't understand. And they go through the manual and they make sure that the ride has been put together by all of the protocols in the manual. They make sure that all of the nuts and bolts are in the right place. all of the safety protocols are in the right place per the manual. So those are what our experts do. The ones that we have hired, where our forensic experts go through and are able to go back and look at the calibrations, go back and look at the mechanisms and the movements, which is not what our engineers do. Our engineers are purely making sure that the equipment is put up to par and the standards that per the manual. This is taking it a step further and saying, okay, this is, like if you ever saw a crash scene in a trial, that you've got people that are reenacting the scene. That is what these experts will do, is basically reenact the scene and come to the conclusions of what happened on that unfortunately fatal night.
Have they been
What
out there
about
yet?
Yes.
the training idea that, do we happen to know whether or not the manufacturer of the ride, at least in the first 6 months of operation or first year, provided not only the training, but also provided its employees to partly or fully operate the ride? Do we know if the manufacturer is the operator of the ride for Slingshot Group?
Okay, repeat that. You lost me there.
So in other words, you make a ride, you sell the ride, but do we know in this case if you not only sold the ride but also provided the employees to actually run it for Slingshot?
No, so there's a separation. You got manufacturer.
Okay.
The manufacturer creates the ride, has the manual. You've all seen the letter from the manufacturer about the question of the seatbelts. Then you have a separate group that operates the ride. So it is the owner, so it's different than you got manufacturer, owner, operator. So you've got basically 3 other parties here.
I have a question. Is training a part of the inspection when you're permitting a ride?
The department does have training requirements that we mandate that they keep up with training records and then provide those to the department upon request.
But when you're permitting, when a new ride shows up, do you like look to see if training records are already in place, or do they fill out the form that FDAX provides, with the boxes and stuff like that, and they have to keep that readily available?
Right, they do have to keep that readily available. If we have a concern that training hasn't taken place, if we see someone who is unfamiliar with the ride, then we'll ask about training records. But it is their responsibility to keep those and provide those to the department at any time that we
So a
request.
ride could be permitted without reviewing training records of an employee? I'm just trying to understand the process.
It could be. There's many employees out there, so even when we do that, we look at training records for people demonstrating the ride to us. They're added all the time. These parks add new employees all the time, so
And
that's
then
why we
another
have that
question I have
requirement.
is could essentially a manufacturer print a rule book, if you will, create a ride, print a rule book, and say, all right, manufacturer says it's safe. Can I want to sell it to an owner-operator in Florida. Is there any kind of test that you guys look for to make sure that ride is actually safe, or is it all the onus all on the manufacturer?
Yeah, we don't do any. We don't have any authorization to do testing. All of our information is based on the manufacturer and the affidavit that they have to provide from an engineer that they've gone through all of those safety protocols that are in our statutes. So there are safety protocols in our statutes that including that they need to get an affidavit saying that the ride is safe, that it's been tested per these standards, and that's what we have to rely on per our statutes.
Are you good with one more question?
Yeah.
Just one more question, please. That's
Just
good.
a quick question. Did you hire one forensic engineer or multiple?
It is entire firm. So it is the Quest Engineering and Failure Analysis. So it is a firm that got hired, and so there's multiple people that could be in that firm. The investigation has started. We know that.
Anything else? Because we're good. I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank
so
you all
much.
for being
So
here.
much. Thank you.
Are you guys expecting any new documents to be uploaded today?
I don't believe so, but I mean, as soon as we get uploads, you all.
Everything that we're going to be getting, you guys are going to be getting it via press releases with a hyperlink on the same Dropbox. So every